Well, I am beyond excited. For one reason, I'm 2 years today completely plant-based, 100% vegan. And the further I go into this, the more vegan I become. When I first became plant-based, I didn't want to call myself a crazy vegan because vegans are crazy. Well, now I call myself a vegan because I really understand the whole psychology behind compassion to animals. And that's why I'm really excited with my guest today, Jeffrey Masson. Jeffrey has written a number of books on the whole ethics of eating, the ethics of veganism, and really compassion to animals. He actually became vegetarian 27 years ago when he wrote a book called When Elephants Weep. And it's a book about the emotional lives of animals. Definite connection there between animals, what we eat, and how we treat them. Then he wrote a book called Dogs Never Lie About Love, because his first book sold 1 million copies and his publisher said, okay, what else are you going to write? And he wrote a book called Dogs Never Lie About Love. And then the next book he wrote was called The Pig Who Sang to the Moon, The Emotional World of Farm Animals. That one touches my heart, and I actually got some chills over that because I know that farm animals, we don't really understand a lot of what's going on with factory farming and farm animals, and I do want to get into that today. And that's when he became vegan, 100% vegan, 18 years ago. And since that time, he's written a book called The Face on Your Plate, Why I Am Vegan. And he tells me, well, that one hasn't yet sold 1 million copies. All his books have sold 1 million copies or more. And that's why I'm so excited, because this man is changing the world. His wife is a vegan pediatric doctor, pediatrician, and she really works with her patients on how to move more into a vegan lifestyle. So with that, Jeffrey, great to have you here.
Well, lovely to be with you, Kathy. It's nice to talk to someone who's on the same wavelength.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I would love to hear more about your background, because you also were a professor of Sanskrit for many years. You were a Freudian psychoanalyst for 10 years, and then a writer about the emotional lives of animals. So tell us a little bit about your progression in life. And you're getting ready to celebrate your 80th birthday, which happy birthday.
I am. Well, it's a complicated story. I'll try and keep it simple. I began my life as a vegetarian. So my parents were vegetarians when I was born in 1941 in Chicago. And at that time, that was unusual to be vegetarian. And my parents were very involved with India. They had been to India. They had a guru. I wrote about that. I became something of a skeptic myself in later life. I wrote a book called My Father's Guru, A Journey Through Spirituality and Disillusion. But in one way, it set me on the right path. Our guru, Paul Brunton, who introduced Indian mysticism to the West in the 40s, was a very gentle guru. He was a fraud, like most gurus are, but he was a gentle fraud, and he was a vegetarian. So I started out life as a vegetarian. In fact, I remember when I was first went to junior high school in Los Angeles, I started an anti-hunting club. And we would walk through the forest with our 22s, which to me is unimaginable today. I would not allow my 14-year-olds to have 22s. And we would shoot up in the trees to make sure the birds all left. And the hunters were very upset and threatened us. And I thought it was funny, but they did not. Mm-hmm. So I began life as a vegetarian. Unfortunately, when I went to university, I went to Harvard to study Sanskrit because my guru wanted me to do that, and I was still under his thrall. I began to move away from vegetarianism, peer pressure. So again, now we're talking, I went to Harvard in 1961, and I must have been the only vegetarian. I certainly didn't know any others. And my best friend was an Indian philosopher, wonderful man, unfortunately died some years ago. And he and I were making meals together, and we didn't know how to cook. So he once looked at a can of tuna fish. He said, Jeff, I think that would be really easy. We just open it and we put it in. And I didn't think about the consequences. And unfortunately, I gave up being a vegetarian then and came back to it only when I wrote When Elephants Weep. So I went to Harvard. I got a degree in Sanskrit, then I had a PhD in Sanskrit. There's not much you can do with a PhD in Sanskrit except teach Sanskrit to somebody else. So I wound up at the University of Toronto teaching Sanskrit, and I had one of those negative epiphanies. You know, I was standing in front of my classroom and I thought, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? This is not me. And so I decided, and I said, well, what is you? And it's not so easy to answer that. I was in 30. I was just recently married. I was about to have my first child, a daughter, 1974. And I was confused. I didn't want to teach Sanskrit, but I couldn't think of anything else. I thought, well, I'm really interested in people. And somebody said to me, well, you should be a psychiatrist. And I didn't know what that meant. So I couldn't go to medical school. I was too old in those days, but I could become a psychoanalyst. How long does it take? Oh, just 10 years. But I committed myself. I'd read Freud. I was fascinated by it. I thought, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. Wrong. I finished. So in 1979, I became a fully accredited Freudian psychoanalyst. But I realized I couldn't just sit in a room for 10 hours a day and listen to people's problems. It just wasn't me. So I met Anna Freud, Freud's daughter, and I told her that. And she was rather cold, and she kind of dismissed me and said, sorry, I can't help you. So I was walking out the room in London, Maresfield Gardens, and there was this very lively little puppy. So I stopped and I started petting the puppy, and the puppy got very excited, and we started running around the room. So she came in and she said, tell me something. You like dogs? I said, I love dogs. She said, sit down, we'll talk some more, she said. So loving dogs got me into Anna Freud's heart.
Wow.
And we became friends. And she said, look, I don't think you should be practicing as a psychoanalyst. But, she said, you have a PhD in Sanskrit, you're good at research. Why don't you look into the history of psychoanalysis? Here's my father's desk. Sit at it and do anything you want. I said, wow. So, and this is the honest to God truth. I opened the front drawer and there was a stack of letters that had never been seen. And you know what the topic was? Child sexual abuse.
Huh.
That had been something I had been very interested in forever, but certainly during my psychoanalytic training. And I was at odds with our teachers because I said, look, women aren't going to tell you they were abused when they weren't. Why would they do that? What's in it for them? No, you've got to understand these are hysterical fantasies that women make up. I said, no, I don't believe that. They said, well, you'll learn. And I didn't learn. What I learned, in fact, is that Freud had been preoccupied with this, but did not have the moral courage to come out and say, it's true. It happens. So in any way, to make a very long story short, I took those letters and I asked Anna Freud if I could publish them and talk about them. And she said, yes, I don't agree with you. I think my father was right. These are fantasies that women have, but I respect your right to your own opinions. And I went to, I became then the director of the Freud Archives. I forgot to mention that. So I didn't have to practice. I had a new job. I gave up my full professorship at the University of Toronto and became the director of the Freud Archives. What I didn't know is that once I said, look, I think we've made a terrible mistake and we've been very unfair to women, here all this material that I found in Freud's desk, Anna Freud made it available to me, and it shows that it is real, and Freud knew it was real. We need to reform. And the analysts were outraged at me. And they said, what is the matter with you? How can you believe these hysterical women? You're a traitor to the family of psychoanalysis. And they fired me. And it was a big deal. It was in the New York Times, front page. Jeffrey Masson has been fired. And then, unfortunately, Janet Malcolm from the New Yorker heard about it and came and interviewed me in Berkeley for a week, and then wrote a terrible piece called In the Freud Archives that smeared me even further. And I said, you know what? I don't need this. I'm glad they fired me. I'm glad I'm no longer a psychoanalyst. I just want to live with Catherine McKinnon, at that time, my fiance, the Harvard law professor. We live on a farm in the middle of nowhere, and I can watch animals and think about animals the rest of my life. And that's how I came to write When Elephants Weep. Now, at the time, I was not a vegetarian. And from time to time, I would say, why are you not vegetarian? You love animals so much. I couldn't make that connection. Mm-hmm. But when I started looking at their emotional lives, I thought, you can't eat an animal. They feel every much as deeply as you do, if not more deeply. Especially you, Mason. You're a man. You don't even feel as deeply as women do, never mind animals. So I wrote the book thinking, I first gave it to the Sierra Club, and they said, no, we can't publish this. It's too crazy. You say too many weird things about animals, and you're obviously, and at the last chapter I said, I'm becoming vegetarian. They said, we don't want anything to do with that. So they wouldn't publish it, but a publisher took it in New York, and it went to the top of the, wow, immediately. And I do know why. I had the good luck of I forget who it was, one of the big television companies came out to Berkeley, where I was living, and they followed me around for 10 days. And then they did a film about it. And that was a huge success.
Well, tell us about what the book When Elephants Weep is about. Where did you get your storyline? Was it did you do it through meditation? Did you actually? I'm fascinated by this because, the further I come into my whole lifestyle as a vegan and plant-based eater, the more I understand the emotions of animals. And I actually had an experience where I was in the grocery store, and this was about 6 months in, walking by the meat department, and I literally stopped and cried because I felt the anguish and the pain. And, so I'm curious, how did you come up with the title, and what is the book specifically about?
Well, the book is about all emotions in wild animals. So it wasn't about domesticated animals, and it wasn't about animals on the farm. Elephants took first place because everybody acknowledged, even scientists who were skeptical of what I was trying to do, that they mourn the death of other elephants. And there was a famous Cynthia Moss, probably the greatest elephant researcher ever. She's still around in Amboseli in Africa. She told a story, which was obviously scientifically true and validated, of a troop of elephants walking by her compound. And elephants, she said, are always interested in the bones of other elephants. It's like when you see dogs, they pass each other. Just came back from a walk along the ocean now. Every dog that we passed stopped to investigate every other dog. Mm-hmm. They had to know, who are you? Where have you been? Do we know each other? If not, let's get together. It's wonderful. Well, elephants do this with bones. They smell bones. And she said one day, a baby elephant stopped with the troop and picked up a jawbone and would not let it go. And the others started to leave, and this elephant did not want to let that jawbone go. She kept stroking it and putting her trunk around it. Finally, reluctantly, she dropped it. And Cynthia Moss was curious. She looked up her records. That was the jawbone of her mother who had died. Oh. So this baby elephant recognized her mother and was grieving her loss.
I can feel that. I feel that right now as you share it.
Me too. Just retelling it.
So, oh my gosh.
And I remember that moment reading that, and I thought, how could we ever kill an animal when they're capable of this kind of complex, profound, emotional mourning, perhaps greater than our own? I mean, we can't touch a bone of our mother and think, gee, now I remember her. We do other things, of course. Mm-hmm. So that led me to believe that there's probably all kinds of emotional, I wouldn't say emergencies, but emotional depth in other animals that we don't even know about. And I remember once I was at UC Berkeley when I was doing research, and I wanted to write something about fish, but I knew very little about them. And I went to see a fish researcher in the university, and he had all these fish in very tiny aquariums, and it hurt me to look at it. And I said to him, he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be anthropomorphic, that is, attribute emotions to animals that they may not have, but it seems to me that this is cruel. These fish are just swimming in this tiny little area. Don't you think they're bored and sad?" And he was appalled. He said, "How can you even think such a thing? Animals don't feel boredom. Animals don't get upset. Animals don't care." And I thought, that's not right. That's really wrong. And it started me thinking about these things. And then I thought, well, what have you done that's wrong? And I thought, well, you eat them. Mm-hmm. That's wrong. Mm-hmm. And so from that moment on, I said, that's it. And I wrote the book with a science writer, Susan McCarthy. She was not vegetarian. And by the end, I said, Susan, we were just friends, not writing together. She did a lot of the research. She's wonderful. And I said, Susan, how can you bring yourself to eat meat after what we've learned? And she said, well, it doesn't affect me. And I said, well, it does me. So in the end, I wrote the final chapter by myself, in which I said, this has led me to become a vegetarian. And then, I happened to meet Cesar Chavez, great farm worker, just by accident. And I said to him, I only had a few seconds, and I said, I want you to know that, like you, I'm a vegetarian. And he looked at me, he said, do you eat eggs and do you drink milk? I said, of course. And he said, well, then you're doing more harm to animals.
Wow.
And I said, what? And then he said, gotta go, and he left.
Wow.
And it started me thinking. I said, I wonder, could he be right? So because the book was a bestseller, my publisher said, okay, and then the dog book. That was easy. Nobody disputed the fact that dogs are capable of love in ways that transcend human power.
Right.
That's for sure. Then they said, now you can write anything you want. I said, well, I'm very curious about farm animals, chickens and cows and goats and sheep and ducks and rabbits. And they said, well, it's not going to be very popular. I said, let me try. And so I did 2 years of research. I would go to farms, I would talk to farmers, but especially I would go to sanctuaries, because I knew that the animals at sanctuaries were no longer hurt. And I thought, that's where I'll find out what they really feel. And there was one in particular called Animal Place in California, and I just adored it. It was near the University of Davis at that time.
Outside of Sacramento.
So I went out there with my wife, who's a pediatrician, as you know, and we were given, at the University of Davis, and the campus, they had what they called a model dairy farm. And I wanted to see it. So they said, sure, we'll give you a graduate student who'll take you around. And this graduate student was taking us around, and I suddenly hear this terrible plaintive, and I said, what is that? And she said, oh, that's a baby calf calling its mother. And I said, well, why? Did they get separated? She said, well, we separate the mother from the calf so that the mother's milk is for us and not for the calf. And at that moment, we heard another sound. I said, what's that? She said, that's the mother calling her calf. And this woman who was taking us around, a graduate student, boy, I wish I had her name. I'd love to know what happened to her, because she was pregnant. And my wife couldn't help herself. She said, look, I'm a doctor, and I find this so upsetting to see a child separated from a mother. We would never do this. How would you feel? She said, in a much nicer way than I would say it. How would you feel if you gave birth and they took your baby away and wouldn't let you breastfeed? And the woman looked, she said, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
And it just transformed me. At that moment, Lila and I looked at each other and said, that's it with milk. But then, I thought Cesar Chavez was right. How can we drink milk? How can we eat eggs? I then went and I insisted. I was living by then in New Zealand. And I said, can I go to a chicken farm? They said, sure. And I was taken to this gigantic chicken farm, and it was just ghastly. You cannot enter a place like that with any sensitivity and not begin to weep.
Right.
Because you see in this tiny little cage 8 or 10 chickens, the size of a piece of paper, and they're just huddled up, and Miserable, miserable. And then when I got to Animal Place, the sanctuary, I saw a completely different picture. Here were these animals that were friendly, that were happy. I remember Kim Sturla, the founder, took me on a walk. We were walking in the hills, and I said, Kim, I get this feeling we're being followed. She will turn around. I turned around, there were 6 pigs. Following us. I said, what is that? She said, pigs are like dogs. They love to follow human shit. My pigs sleep in my room at night, and one of them likes to get up on the bed. What's wrong with that? And it was so true. You know, there's no difference between the emotional life of a dog and the life of any other animal on the farm.
Absolutely.
Now, most people would never even dream of eating their dog. And, you know, the penny drop, well, then how can we do this to these other animals?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I want to let everybody know that I'm talking with Dr. Jeffrey Masson, and this is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health. And Jeffrey, you have already pulled at my heartstrings. You've, I've been near tears several times as you're sharing your stories, and I can only imagine what it was like to be in the middle of that, because right now we're actually going through devastating fires in the state of Oregon, California, Washington. And we have a rescue dog. All of our animals are rescues. We've got horses, we've got chickens, a rooster is our latest addition, a cat, 2 dogs, and have had many over the years. And the littlest dog, she's about 9.5 pounds, and she came out of one of those types of situations a couple of years ago. And it's interesting to watch her behaviors right now, because it's as if she can sense that there's a lot of danger not too far from where we're at. And fortunately, we're out of the evacuation area, but it's just, 8-10 miles down the road. But it's so fascinating how you've come to your own revelations of having an experience that you go, oh, now I connect the dots. And it seems like your books, because I definitely want to talk about The Pig Who Sang on the Moon, Sang to the Moon, The Emotional World of Farm Animals, and The Face on Your Plate. We want to talk about that book too. But it seems to me that part of your life's work, it all has evolved into raising awareness and helping people to connect the dots, because it shocks me when somebody says they're such an animal lover and they do everything to protect the animals, they rescue animals, and then they have a steak on their plate. And it's like, where's the disconnect? Where are you not getting it? So before we talk about your other books, how would you educate somebody in a way that you're not shoving it down their throat, you're not, telling them they're a bad person. It's just that they're misinformed, or they haven't been made aware yet. So how would you do that?
Well, I just read something yesterday that impressed me, a good word. It was called deep listening. And they were talking to how do you talk to people who don't believe there's such a thing as climate change? And then rather than scream at them, rather than show them horrendous pictures, you engage in something called deep listening. As person to person. Now, I have done that unsuccessfully on farms. And here's what would happen. I would go to farmers. So I liked especially to go to places where I knew that the animals were saved. So sanctuaries. But I also had to go to farms. I had to talk to farmers. And invariably they would tell me, I love my animals. And the next question, I couldn't help myself. It was the wrong question. But I would say, well, then, how do you bring yourself to kill them and eat them if you love them?
Right.
And I try to think, is there some nice way of saying that? But it always struck me. They'd say, we love these animals. Yes, you love them to death in the literal sense. You love them, and then you kill them and you eat them. And I was looking for some. Now, Lila, my wife, was much better at this because she's a woman and because she's much less confrontational. And I have learned, as you put it, to try not to get up in their face. But it's still not easy for me. I think younger people have an easier time of this. I think if you listen to them and you simply point out what I did with the book is I said, well, tell me, don't you think that these, you say you love them, good, I believe you. I didn't, but I said I do. I believe you. my question then, do you think they have feelings? And often they would say, well, sure, yeah. And I'd say, well, like, can you tell me a little bit about it? Do they form friendships? Oh, yeah. And then they tell me a story of two sheep that became good friends. Or sometimes it's very touching. There'd be a blind sheep and one other sheep would be by his side and guide him all the time. And so I'd bring this out. Oh, they have friendships. And do you think they really care about one another? Oh, yeah, definitely. They can feel, they feel bad when another animal is hurting. And I said, oh, so very much like us, right? Yeah, very much like us. And I'd say, well, I believe they even can feel love. Do you think so? Oh, I don't know. That's a tough one, but maybe, yeah. And after a while, then I'd say, well, if that's the case, and they're not so different from us, maybe they don't communicate the way we do. They don't have a writing system. They don't invent television. But, I would say something like, in my opinion, no human I've ever known is as relaxed or even as, as feeling the comfort that a cat feels. Mm-hmm. When a cat lies in the sun and you just look at them and you say, oh my God, if only I could be like that. And then I'd say, and as for dogs, I do believe that they feel a much more uncomplicated kind of love for us, for one another. It's never ambivalent. They're always happy to see us. They don't ever think of us as the enemy, or they just adore us. And it's greater than our own capacity for love, don't you think? Well, maybe. And I say, so sometimes I ask myself, I don't tell them I'm a vegan. I ask myself, how can I eat these animals? Surely they suffer when we kill them. Surely they want to continue their life just as we do. They have a biography. They were born. They have friends. They have family. And once in a great while, somebody would say, that's worth thinking about. Absolutely. But most of the time, of course, they wouldn't, because their livelihood was there. I did understand, and I was thinking, what could we do that would really make them change? Now, a couple of days ago, I just saw an article where a furrier, a man who had a fur farm, he was patting his dog, and he said, my dog has the most beautiful fur. And suddenly he said, oh my God, fur. The animals that I raise have fur, and I've been keeping, what am I thinking? And it was like a moment, an illumination. Mm-hmm. Some angel had gotten to him. He said, that's it. I'm giving up this farm. I will never do that again. And, I love to ask people, maybe you'll tell me, what was the moment for you when you thought, oh my God?
I have to tell you, it's so interesting, because I actually have a lot of clients in the pet industry, and I am a keynote speaker. I used to go to conferences and speak on the platform, and now we do it all virtually. And it was so interesting, because here I was so involved in the pet industry, and one day it occurred to me, here I'm involved in animal rescue. I work within the pet industry. I'm all about compassion to animals, saving the animals. And it just hit me one day. It's like, you're such a fraud. You're so out of alignment. It's like, on the one hand, you're saying this is true. On the other hand, you're living a lie. And I didn't initially go plant-based because of the animals. I actually did because of arthritis and inflammation. And I'm getting at that age where that's a real deal. And I did some research and came across the works of Dr. Joel Fuhrman, Dr. T. Colin Campbell, the usual suspects, if you will. And I realized, okay, maybe if I give up dairy and animal-based products, it might help. I thought I'll try it for 7 days. And it was just like these layers kept being removed. And it was that day in the grocery store where literally I could just feel the pain and anguish of the animals. And it was so deep. And I thought, I can never, ever have an animal on my plate again. And, which I love the title of your book, The Face on Your Plate. Because I really, there's a new commercial that the vegan, I don't know what organization put it out. But it's the flip side, like what you were saying, of trying to be more compassionate about the way we tell people, are you serious? You're really going to eat animals? It's this couple that goes into the butcher shop and orders some veal. And they say, we want the freshest you have, the freshest you have. And they start going, yeah. Oh, you want the freshest we have? And they spread it down the line. Okay, get the freshest. And they bring this baby lamb out. And they say, here's the freshest, and this lamb is alive. And the husband goes, well, no. And they said, oh, no, that's the freshest. That's how it starts. And it ends up like this. And all of a sudden, you can just see the light bulb go on. Now, your wife is involved in medicine. She's a pediatrician, and she works with, obviously, children, helping them to become vegan. I'm fascinated by that because I'm going to actually have your wife on my show. But I'd love you to just give me a little glimpse of what she does and when she became vegan, and what her commitment to all that is.
Well, we've been together now, as you saw, she's quite a bit younger than me, but we've been together. And
that's when I called you a stud. It's like, okay, yeah. There you go.
We've been together 26 years.
Okay.
And we raised our kids as vegetarians. We had a lot of trouble getting them to go vegan. I'm not sure why. And our older son, who's 24, he's just about to join the European Union, working for the European Union in Brussels. And he says, Dad, I so badly want to go vegan, but it's that little step with the mozzarella. What do I do? And, I think he has to go through something like you went through, some epiphany, some moment where you suddenly see it. It's not somebody telling you, you do it for yourself. And Lila tells what her thing, like you, I came to being a vegan simply out of, I couldn't bear the thought of animal suffering. It was just that. I could not be complicit. I couldn't think I'm responsible for the death of, I would never in 1,000 years kill an animal. How could I sit down and eat it and let somebody else kill it? So for me, it was simple. For Lila, it was a health matter. She had seen children. She saw the first thing she does, she works with children often on the spectrum. So you'll hear it all from her. So children who are autistic, who have Asperger, have great anxiety, or ADHD. And the first thing she does is she gets rid of dairy. And she tells them, look, we did not evolve to drink the milk of another species. It's just not healthy. Never mind any of the other things. It's not good for you. And they take that from her. And she sees amazing changes just with that one thing. The other thing is she gets rid of gluten. I find that difficult. But for her sake, I know she's so smart. If she tells me, give up gluten, I give up gluten. But I do it for 2 weeks and then I've got to have bread. I've got to have bread. But, and then she slowly tells them, what is your child eating? What do they have for breakfast? Bacon? Well, I don't think that's such a good idea. She explains it in terms of health, and she has profound knowledge of the health, as does, Joel Fuhrman and Pam Popper and T. Colin Campbell and those people. They come to it from a health perspective. And I respect that. And I realize that for myself, and now it's been 18 years since I've been vegan, I think that's the reason I'm able to bench press my own weight, and I still run in the morning and I do 40 push-ups. I think without that, I'd be like most of the men I know who are 80 or just sit, in a chair and read. I mean, I'm very active, and I'm sure it's because of that. So it's very good. And of course, now what you see constantly on the internet and in newspapers and on television is the recognition by people who are not vegan, but who recognize that a plant-based diet is saving the planet.
Absolutely.
We cannot go on treating animals the way we have. That is what's causing climate change. That is what's causing all the horrible, even the fires now, they associate
Absolutely.
it. And you see
Absolutely.
people, they say, I'm not a vegan, but I recognize that what we're doing in Brazil and around the world and growing food for animals that we then slaughter, this is not good for our planet. So you have these three things that are making a huge difference. And every day, every single day around the world, more and more people are going plant-based.
Absolutely. Well, awareness is being raised without a doubt, and the internet has a lot to do with it. And people like you, people like me. I mean, once I went plant-based and I realized all the health benefits, because I actually dropped 35 pounds within a couple of months. I mean, it just melted off because if I had a donut, I had to have the whole box. I'm just an addictive kind of person. I've been sober for 36 years, so it's like when I went in all the way. And I think more and more people are becoming aware, but it really does shock me when people deny the fact that we're going through climate change. I was just reading something about the Dust Bowl in the 30s. It was all directly related to what we did to strip the earth of the trees.
That's right.
And so, and our own president denies it. I mean, he laughed at it the other day. And it's like, oh my goodness, I could get into a whole rant about that. But I don't pretend to like the fact that we've got a president that has done more for the harm of our health and our planet. And really, it's a matter of even, put the topic of climate change aside, just what it's doing to the air and the pollution and, the cruelty to animals. It always amazes me, Jeffrey, when people say, oh, I don't want to see those videos with what they're doing to animals. It's like, maybe you need to see that, because then maybe you'll have an awakening to realize that you're responsible for that. If you're eating animals, you are partially responsible for that. And, on your book, you're getting me going here now. I'm getting on my my soapbox.
I love it.
That's why I love having this podcast show, because it's like it gives me the opportunity to voice what I believe to be true. The face on your plate.
You're a good example. Allow me to say you look fantastic.
Thank you. Just turned 66, and I run a lot.
Look at that pure skin, and I mean, it's amazing.
It's all the lights.
Like me.
It's the lights. But I actually run on a regular basis. But since we've had the fires, we've been really confined to our homes, where unless you have to go out, you can't go out. They're saying don't. And it's so interesting, because I'm in Oregon, in Central Oregon. We're in a farming community. But it's so interesting, because if you look at what's occurring in the world, with the masks and the pandemic, and now the fires and the floods, and people are being forced to go inside on a more metaphysical and spiritual level. We're being required to go internally, to look inside. And if we were to look inside, we would have all the answers we need to heal the planet, to heal people. I love what your wife is doing, because children are at such high risk nowadays. But with your book, The Face on Your Plate, tell me about that book.
Well, that came about because, and again, that's probably about 15 years ago, I noticed that the word vegan was not being used. And even at the time, I was once asked to give to the Humane Society of the United States a keynote speech. And that would be very different today. But these were all the heads of shelters. Mm-hmm. So there were like 1,000 people in the audience who were all heads of some shelter around the country. And Wayne Pacell, who's now a good friend, but at the time, I didn't know him very well. And just before I got up to speak, he said, Jeff, please don't use the word vegan. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute, what's wrong now? And I got up, and I'm both honored and ashamed to say, Wayne here has asked me not to use the word vegan, but I'm going to use it. And here's why. So I thought, I've got to be upfront about this. I'm a vegan. And at that point, they weren't using the word plant-based. I'm okay with it, and I use it a lot. I'm a little bit reluctant. I prefer vegan. I'll tell you why. You can say you're plant-based. That means your basic food is plants, but you also add from time to time some honey, some chicken, some cheese. And a vegan means, no, you don't do that. So I still prefer vegan. But most people who say plant-based mean I only eat plants, which is great.
Well, and myself, I do plant-based / vegan. It's like
that's a
I've
great one. I hadn't
incorporated
thought
that
of
in. I have a T-shirt that says "Vegan AF," and you can figure out what the AF stands for. It's like,
Right?
and I want everybody to know that I am just thrilled beyond thrilled that I'm talking with Dr. Jeffrey Masson. And how do people find you? Let's make sure that we can let them know.
Well, I have a website,
which is
jeffreymason.com.
okay, and I'll put that in the show notes.
www.jeffreymason.com.
We'll make sure that we spread this interview around.
If you Google me, all of my books come up. If you go to Amazon, I've written, I'm ashamed to say, 31 books. My mother, who passed away at 97, one of the last things she said to me was Yiddish. She said, "Jeffrey, genug gepischt." You peed enough, enough writing for you.
Maybe we'll title this, "You Peed Enough." Okay.
But stop it already. But I did write one last book. I think it's probably my last book.
I don't know.
It was called Lost Companions, Reflections on the Death of Pets. I didn't want to write it, but when our dog died after 14 years, I was so profoundly upset and moved by this. It got me thinking. And I wanted to read something good about the death of pets, and I couldn't find it. Shirley MacLaine has done it, but
right. With what was her dog's name? Terry. I think her dog's. I've been. It's funny you should mention Shirley MacLaine. I'm on a Shirley MacLaine binge with books. I've read her books for 35 years now, and recently I don't know. It was just this spark of like I ordered every book of hers that I could, and I've got a stack of Shirley MacLaine books, and I'm trying to think of the most recent one I read, but I've got them all. I love her philosophy.
Well, I was not happy with what I was finding because I wanted something that talked about, if anybody goes to the internet, they'll see the kinds of things I deal with in there. But the main point of that book was don't let anyone tell you it's just an animal, get over it.
Right.
You're as entitled as you would be if your father, your mother, any member of your family dies. It's a very elaborate grieving process for many people, and nobody has a right to tell you enough.
Absolutely.
So,
it's interesting because it's a rescue dog that we had probably, she went over the Rainbow Bridge probably 3 years ago, and she came to us on, we have a small farm, and she just showed up one day. It was a really bad weather day, and we couldn't even tell what kind of dog she was. She was in such bad shape. It turns out that she was a puppy mill breeder dog. She was about 10 years old, a Shih Tzu, toy Shih Tzu, and in very bad shape. We really thought we were going to have to let her go, and she ended up being with us for 4 years. We did some surgeries where we got rid of the tumors on her belly, and I did a GoFundMe. Well, that opened up an opportunity to speak at my first pet conference. That opened up another one. And at one point, about 50% of my business came from the pet industry. And I always attribute that to Delaney, our little heart dog. And when she left, it was so interesting because we waited until the right time that the next little animal would come to us. And, that's kind of how it works in our life. These animals just show up on our property. It's like, okay.
Well, that is the best way.
Yeah,
I have to say, yesterday, our builder told me, a strange thing happened. We're renovating our house. This cat came to our door and would not leave, and been there the whole time. And I asked around, and then I found that he was living just a few blocks away. And the owner said, "You know what? I don't like that cat. You can keep him." And the cat obviously knew it.
Wow.
How could I resist? And I thought, that's the way to get an animal.
Absolutely.
They come to you. But the second best way, and I'm sure you agree with me, is rescue.
Yes.
So don't buy a dog or cat. Go to a rescue. They need you. I assure you, if you go into any shelter, and the cats as you walk by, the cats will put their arms through the bar and try and grab you. "Take me home, please."
Absolutely.
And dogs look at you with, "I don't belong here. I belong with you."
Absolutely.
And that's the way to do it.
Yes. Well, I have a question with leading back into the whole veganism. And if somebody wants to go vegan. They're sincere about it. They really are ready to give it a shot. And, their family is doing whatever their family is doing, but they're saying, what are the first steps that I can take? What would you advise to somebody?
Well, the first steps, I believe that one should go, I was going to say cold turkey, but I was just thinking that's a terrible phrase. Where does that come from? I don't like the idea of turkey being cold. I want them to be warm-blooded and wandering around. But I think that for many people, the easiest is to say, like you did, that's it. I'm not going to do it anymore. Other people, I know I've met people say, I'm vegetarian, and then they'll tuck into a fish, and I look at them and I say, what do you mean? But they're taking the slow steps. And for some people, that's the way to do it. They go vegetarian, but eat fish, then they give up fish. Then they think, well, maybe I should give up cheese, and they give up cheese. Well, cheese, same as dairy, they give up dairy. They say, what about eggs? Well, but what I find now, and even more so in America, I'm in Sydney, Australia, where it's not quite as, I remember when I was in where you are, and I was amazed going into a Whole Foods, how much variety of plant-based food there was, just everything. And now you have Beyond Burger.
Absolutely.
Which I confess my wife loves it. I don't. I love it, but it reminds me too much of meat.
That's like near beer. I've been sober 36 years, and I won't do near beer. I won't do anything that even resembles alcohol. But I get that. But I like when people buy Beyond.
I've never had a glass of alcohol in my life. My parents were strict, and I once said to Lila, maybe we should have it. Why would we do that?
Yeah, why start now?
She was also the same. It's one of the things that attracted to it. No smoking, no drinking, no meat eating.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So,
but I think what you can tell people, look, there are vegan cheeses that are amazing today. They're just as good. You can barely tell the difference. Beyond Meat, I haven't tasted the Impossible Burger yet, but evidently even people who eat meat can't tell the difference.
Right.
They've now got a new scrambled egg. I haven't tasted that either. So, that's vegan.
Right.
So why would you, and soy milk to me, I love all the nut milks.
Yes.
And by mistake, about a year ago, I was with a group of people. We ordered our coffee here, a flat white, it's called here, soy flat white. And it came and I took a taste. I said, oh my God, what is that? And I said to the waiter, what happened? Are you sure this is soy milk? Oh, he said, I'm so sorry. I forgot. And I gave you cow's milk.
Oh my gosh.
It tasted so bad to me. It was like, I don't know, it was like eating snot or something.
Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah, for sure.
It's not. And I do believe we did not evolve to drink that stuff.
You are so correct. We can look at the health.
It's so good. Almond milk. There's so many different kinds of nut milks. So I find that really easy. They're wonderful. Miyoko makes the world's best soy butter. No, it's not. I don't know what she makes it from, but it's fabulous.
Right.
So there's no product that I really miss. My wife said when she was very young, she loved to have smoked salmon. But now in the United States, they have a fake smoked salmon.
Right.
I shouldn't say fake. They have a carrot-based smoked salmon.
Right.
That tastes the same.
Right.
So, if you can eat that and know that you're not harming an animal, why wouldn't you do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what I tell people who are finding it difficult, go into a nice health food store and look at all the products and try them until you find your favorite.
There it is. Because there are options without a doubt. So I've been talking with Dr. Jeffrey Masson. This has been fascinating. And Jeffrey, again, people can find you at jeffreymason.com. They'll find your books there. They can go to Amazon. And as your mother said, you've, what is it? What was it? So
I tell you, I want one more book, but I haven't found a publisher yet because of the title. It's called What's Wrong with Our Species?
Ooh.
Because I want to try and understand. I don't think, this is a kind of difficult question. You might think about it. Was there ever a time in human history, prehistory, when we were hunter-gatherers, that somebody would have said, I'm not going to kill an animal. I don't think so. So the question is, why weren't we more enlightened before now? I think in that sense, we're living in a good time. You have your community. I find people all the time, especially young people who are vegan. Our son's at the University of Melbourne. He said half the students at the college he's in are either vegetarian or vegan.
Nice.
That's wonderful. When I went to school, when I was at Harvard, I thought I was the only vegetarian there. I'm sure I wasn't, but they certainly weren't everywhere.
Well, people were more closed-mouthed about it before than they are now. In the past, it was kind of like, oh, don't tell anybody. Yeah, because then they'll think you're a woo-woo and you're a hippie and you're this and that, and which is so interesting. But
you get that you're in rural, you're near Portland, right?
I'm actually 100 miles south. I'm 100 miles south of Portland. So
do you get that? What are you talking about?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's actually Eugene, Oregon has a lot of plant-based vegan restaurants, and right now we're not open, a lot of them, but we're a pretty progressive community here. But this has been wonderful. This has been wonderful. And in closing, what are your final thoughts for people as they consider this as a possible lifestyle change and about the animals and the planet?
Well, my thoughts would be, you're doing yourself a favor. You're doing your friends a favor, because you're going to find yourself talking about it. And look, even if 1 in 100 of your friends says, gee, I never thought about that, and they change. I mean, sometimes I feel despair. I think, I've written all these books, but who knows what it's done. But every once in a while, someone emailed me and said, I read your book, one of them, and I stopped eating meat, or I went vegan. Wow. I think, if that's all I did for one person, that's something. And you have that too. You reach so many people. And when you think that it's good for you, it's good for your friends, it's good for your children, it's good for your relatives, it's good for the planet, and especially it's good for the animals.
Absolutely.
You are no longer involved in causing suffering to animals. And that, it makes me so happy to know that. I would not, today I may be a little bit crazy, but we have a tiny, weird little fly in our bathroom. And he's been there for a month. And I would not kill that fly for anything in the world. He's living, or she. She has a right to live, and I have no right to harm her. She's not doing anything to me except look very cute.
I love that. I love that. Well, Dr. Jeffrey Masson, it has been truly, truly delightful. It's been a blessing, and I love what you're doing. I'm going to make sure that people know about this episode and that they go out and get your books. I know that I'm going to be ordering your books, and thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful. Have a great day.
You've been wonderful too, I have to say. I admire what you do, and I think it's just fantastic that you're doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your commitment to an ethical life through plant-based food choices. The kind of choices that are kind to your body, the environment, and most of all, animals. Be sure to leave a review and rating of the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show.